has won the Daytona Superbike race and gone on to win the Superbike championship. Maybe that was exactly what both Schwantz and Merkel were thinking as they doused each other with champagne. The Sonoma Valley in Northern California, famous for winemaking and its picturesque beauty. For motorsports fans, the Sonoma Valley means Sears Point International Raceway. The Serpentine 2.5-mile track was the site of round 2 of the championship series. Except for Eddie Lawson, everyone who was at Daytona showed up at Sears Point. The number 34 Suzuki was on hand, once again in the capable hands of Texan Kevin Schwantz. Despite the absence of Lawson, Yamaha was at full strength. Their new find, 17-year-old John Kaczynski, had been too young to race at Daytona, but was of legal age to ride at Sears Point. Kaczynski and veteran Jim Felice would be the Yamaha mainstays for the remaining 8 races. Team Honda, meanwhile, had their 2-rider team consisting of Wayne Rainey and Fred Merkel, the defending champion. Merkel, number 1, knows better than anyone that Sears Point is one of the most demanding circuits. There is never a moment's rest. Either you're turning or setting up for one. Lots of body English, braking, shifting, and accelerating. Sears Point is not nearly as fast as Daytona, but it is much more of a rider's track. Merkel and his mechanics, Mike Velasco and Merlin Plumley, know how important race setup is at Sears Point. To get a production-based machine to negotiate Sears Point is a challenge. Merkel has faced that challenge in the past and has won. This year, he faced increasing odds.
Everybody came out with new equipment this year, and everything's really up to date, you know, state-of-the-art stuff. You know, you can go to your local shop, a Honda shop, and buy a bike that looks just like mine, and it performs, you know, not quite as fast, but it handles just as good and everything else. It's really neat having all the manufacturers back in with all this trick equipment.
Not everyone at Sears had the newest trick equipment. Some, like Honda-mounted Bubba Schobert, had year-old equipment. At the green flag, all of the competitors on hand had 24 laps to learn the track and answer all the pre-race questions. The question of who would be leading in the early going was answered after the first lap traffic was sorted out. Number 6 Honda-mounted Wayne Rainey and number 34 Suzuki-mounted Kevin Schwantz were the pace setters. They had been close in qualifying and in their heat race. It was only logical then that they would lock horns in the final. The 2 championship rivals pulled away from the field. Sometimes there would be 3 or 4 seconds between them, but that would only last a few laps. Suddenly, they would be nose to tail again. One thing seemed for sure, and that was either number 6 or number 34 would be the first one to the finish line. No one else on the track could match their pace. Unfortunately, sometimes the first one to the finish line does not always win the race. Both Rainey and Schwantz learned that lesson the hard way. During a yellow flag caution period, confusion reigned supreme. Schwantz, riding on the edge, trying to stay close to Rainey, was caught passing a back marker under the yellow flag. Race officials claimed Rainey was guilty of the same infraction. The result, both riders were docked a lap. The penalty elevated third-place Fred Merkel into the lead and Bubba Schobert on the year-old Honda number 67 into second place. While Honda held down the official first and second places, Team Yamaha was having problems. Number 17 Jim Felice was thrown from his bike when his engine seized. Young John Kaczynski crashed trying to keep pace with the race leaders. Kaczynski wasn't the only rider who fell victim to Sears Point. The demanding track took its toll on many of the competitors. Even though Rainey and Schwantz knew from their pit boards of their penalties, they continued to battle on. Merkel knew all he had to do was stay upright and the win would be his. And that's just what he did. Merkel cruised to the win and, more importantly, the lead in the Superbike standings. Bubba Schobert rode a steady race to take second, while Otis Lance, a Texas privateer, was third. Round 3 of the series, Brainerd, Minnesota, the Pepsi Honda Classic. At 3 miles in length and 10 long sweeping turns, the Brainerd course places emphasis on horsepower. Wayne Rainey and his number 6 Honda apparently had the most horses as he outpaced his competitors during qualifying and his heat race. After the successive disappointments at Daytona and Sears Point, Rainey knew he would have to accumulate some major points fast in order to have a shot at the championship. His competition competition at Brainerd fell behind for several reasons. First, Yamaha decided to stay home. Engine quality control problems back in Japan were apparently the cause for the engine failures at Daytona and Sears Point. Rather than risk further injury to their riders, Yamaha decided to stay away until they could sort out their problems. Rainey's Sears Point rival, Suzuki's Kevin Schwantz, would not ride either. The Texan crashed his Suzuki in practice and broke his collarbone. Thus, Rainey's main competition was his teammate and Series Point leader Fred Merkel. But Merkel, too, had problems. In his qualifying heat race, the defending series champ failed to finish due to a minor clutch problem.
Nobody behind me.
When it came to race time, Merkel found himself straining to see the front row. Because of his failure to score a heat race finishing position, his #1 machine would have to start from the back row. Rainey, on the other hand, started from the pole position, and when the green flag fell, he was gone. Rainey put on a devastating display of riding, and his Honda was clearly the fastest bike on the track. No one even came close. Merkel, meanwhile, was putting on a show in his own right. Starting from the last row of the grid, he sliced through the field, and by half distance was in second place. He closed to within 13 seconds of the leader, but Rainey maintained the distance between his teammate, riding at a reduced pace all the way to the checkered flag. Rainey and Merkel had both put on a show, one from the front of the grid, one from the back of the grid. The championship standings now had Rainey in second place behind his Honda teammate. When he arrived in the winner's circle, hand high in the air, Rainey had broken the string of bad luck that had haunted him in the first 2 races. The Brainerd win would serve as a springboard to a string of wins. The Brainerd round was the first of 4 consecutive race weekends that would play a major role in the Superbike Series Championship. The second of those 4 rounds took place on the longest road race course in America, Road America, in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin. For the second race in a row, the Superbike final would pit Wayne Rainey against Fred Merkel, Honda versus Honda. Kevin Schwantz was still recuperating from his fall, and Yamaha was still regrouping. Bubba Schobert rejoined the circuit after missing Brainerd due to a dirt track commitment. Fred Merkel was #1 in the standings, but second fastest in qualifying. For the second race in a row, Rainey was looking behind him for his competition. Starting from pole position, Rainey repeated his performance of the previous weekend in Minnesota. The Downey, California resident never put a wheel out of place, and his Honda Interceptor never missed a beat. Merkel hung close for a while until it became obvious to all concerned that he could not catch the speeding Rainey. Instead, he maintained a safe pace to ensure a runner-up finish and retain the lead in the standings. Number 53 privateer Dan Shivington from Ohio passed Bubba Schobert in the late going. Schobert, riding last year's Interceptor to the limit, finished in 4th and put himself into 4th place in the standings. The dirt specialist had emerged as a force to be reckoned with on the pavement. But the man with the momentum and the winning streak was Wayne Rainey. 2 wins in a row, and he was now breathing down his teammate's neck in the standings. The Honda show continued at the next race in Loudon, New Hampshire. The Loudon Classic is the oldest sanctioned road race in America. Steeped in tradition, the Loudon Classic draws fans from all over the Northeast for a summer celebration of racing and New England hospitality. The Loudon round also marked the return of Team Yamaha and their riders Jim Felice and John Kaczynski. After Eddie Lawson's win at Daytona, Yamaha's fortunes had turned sour. Loudon was one of the most important races on the schedule, along with Daytona and Laguna Seca. If they were going to turn around their season, Loudon was where it needed to happen. Although the pre-race build-up pitted Yamaha against Honda, the battle never materialized. From the green flag, it was a Honda train from 1st to 3rd place. As in the previous 2 races, it was Rainey #6, followed by Merkel #1. The different twist this time, however, was Bubba Schobert's eventual 3rd place finish. Number 67 Schobert did not have an easy go of it, though. He diced with number 32 road race veteran Dale Quarterly for the last few laps. Schobert finally got by to earn the 3rd spot. It was an impressive display of superiority by Honda with a 1-2-3 sweep. Fred Merkel, with his trusted tuner Mike Velasco riding shotgun, still held on to a dwindling points lead with his 3rd runner-up finish in a row. Team Yamaha's Loudon Challenge fell short. The best they could muster was a disappointing 10th and 15th.